Before we start this show, just a word from our sponsor, 20 by 20 Apparel. Founded in 2015, 20 by 20 Apparel brings original tributes to pro wrestling's classic arenas, moments, and events. They look to spotlight the bloopers, bleeps, and body slams along with the biggest, smallest, strangest, and strongest that pro wrestling has had to offer. Along with their awesome line of pro wrestling apparel, they do offer many services. In the world of wrestling, there are hundreds of shirts, promotions, flyers, social media accounts, and ads. Don't get lost in the sea of parody shirts and display fonts. They can provide professional graphic design services at a reasonable price. 20 by 20 also hand screen prints all the tees in-house. If you would like to discuss possible run of tees, posters, koozies, foam fingers, or whatever, drop them a line. Go to 20 by 20 Apparel. That's the number 20x, the number 20 apparel.com. Now, let's get to the show.
Fresh is the word.
I'm Jim Duggan, got long wood for plenty hoes. I keep it fresher than fresh, but you already know. You suckers bummy, I'm money, I got a ton of flows. My weed loud like a motherfucking thunder roll. Your shit quiet like you ballin' on a budget though. We see your kicks and we laugh and yellin' what are those. You see me shining like a suit on puffy. You know my grindin' shit is too strong, buddy. That's why the dude call money. I be stuntin' like it's nothing at all. Cause it's nothing to me, it's probably something to y'all. Trying to smoke like me, then come and fuck with your dog. Got a closet full of kicks, you can't cop it tomorrow. And I'm fresher than the freshest, you can tell it's in my essence. Bitch, you see the way I'm rapping, yes I do this shit to death. Until I'm running out of breath, or tell somebody cut a check. But either way you know it's fresh, and either way you know it's fresh. Fresh, we fresh. Fresh, fresh, goddammit, we fresh.
Welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. This is episode 99. Yes, we are almost at episode 100. This week's guest is comic book writer and artist Dan Dougherty, most known for Beardo and Touching Evil, and most recently illustrated Cosa Nostra and wrote Floppy Cop. During our chat, we talked about working on Cosa Nostra with Dirk Manning, and on Floppy Cop with Seth Damoose, Milena Denano, and J.P. Fosgitt. And we also talked about the mental health side of working on comics with dark material, working pop culture conventions, building your audience, the idea of risk when choosing projects, and the creative freedom of working with friends. So let's get on to my interview with Dan Dougherty. Yeah, recently I picked up the Floppy Cop comic book and also the ghost variant of Cosa Nostra. What are some of the things that you've been working on these days?
Yeah, that's a good question because I haven't had a lot of opportunities to talk about the new stuff. It's always like, people talk about the old things. So the new stuff I'm really excited about. So what have I been up to these days? Like what's been going on?
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of had this really busy spring collaborating with a couple different creators. Dirk Manning and I, which pretty big Kickstarter funded, created own projects. So basically he does like Tales of Mystery and Nightmare World, and we've been talking for a bit about like what could we do together, since I also have dabbled a little bit in that genre with my Touching Evil series. So we've had it around for a bit. We've been friends for a long time now, so it's been an ongoing conversation, and finally arrived on this Cosa Nostra book, which is really awesome. Like I'm happy that that's the thing that we settled upon, because I think it's the best use of our collective skills. It let me go back to doing some traditional ink washing stuff on a very noir, black and white kind of book. So that's been keeping me pretty busy. The book is going to be about 4 issues long, and it's about this twin who discovers that his mafia tied twin brother has been murdered, and his ghost has come back to basically blackmail him into helping him avenge his death. Like he's not taking no for an answer, this ghost. And
right, man, that brother is an asshole. I'm just gonna say
really,
that.
I had a fun time drawing him too, because like he's such a dick. So I'm like really trying to come up with the facial expressions that I thought were best for his for just how he conducts himself. Like he's got that kind of wise guy language, which I gotta ask Dirk, like if they actually spoke out loud, like does the good twin, does he speak normally, and like his twin brother like is like, oh hey, what's going on over here, forget about it, and then his other
Right.
twin like, you're from Ohio. Like, what are you doing? I don't know. But I acting out as on the good twin side as kind of a pushover, and then as the bad ghost twin as a total monster. And Dirk says it's his most evil villain to date, so get ready for some terrible stuff to happen in the next issues.
Yeah, Cosa Nostra is really good. I'm really excited to see where this comic book goes.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to tell the story with Dirk too. It's been really a lot of fun getting to collaborate with somebody that I was friends with first, and I've always enjoyed his work, and he's enjoyed mine. So like we're fans of each other and friends, and now it's like we're cohorts. And then to answer the other part of it with Floppy Cop, that came about sort of in a reaction to the book I just described, as well as other books. Like between working on Cosa Nostra and working on my supernatural thriller Touching Evil, you get in this headspace day to day that gets a little murky. Like it's kind of like it gets heavy, man. Like it's really dark sometimes, and like especially when I have to write the Touching Evil stuff, I have to really go into some places for the characters that I got to be mindful of am I hitting the right tone. So like you kind of get in character a little bit. It gets to be a bummer. And so I was talking about this with Seth Damoose, who we also have a brader, since Seth does a good chunk of the Mr. E books with him, and he had just come off what he said was the most like grueling, mentally draining run of drawing on the latest issue of Tales, or a latest book, I should say, of Tales of Mr. E, because apparently, and I haven't read it yet, but apparently it is a beast. Like this thing is like nobody's safe in it, and like
right.
bad things happen to good people, and like I don't know what's going on in there, but I'm dying to know. And so we were just like, sort of venting about that together at a show, and I'm like, we need to do something together that's goofy and fun. And so enter Floppy Cop, which I thought was the goofiest thing I could think of. He's a cop with balls of steel and no spine in his back whatsoever. So he flops around, and like the visual of him is funny enough to me as it is. Like without even writing anything, just looking at him on paper or in my mind cracks me up every time. Wanted to see, I wanted to work with Seth for a long time again, and I wanted to do something funny with him because he's so fun. Like his art's one of my favorite. I don't know how to put this, but it's kind of like an amusement park that I could just go and ride all the rides on all the time and just feel good again. To see him take this fun stuff for Mr. E, and it shows how versatile he is. But I really just wanted to see him do some funny, goofy stuff, and he wanted to as well. And so Floppy Cop is just the result of that. And we're working in issue 2 right now, and it's got some of the funniest things I've ever seen in it. Like, especially seeing how he draws it just makes it so much better. But yeah, the premise of that is just really, it's about this cop who has you don't know why he doesn't have a backbone yet, but like it's just not there, so he's flopping around, and he's got a wonderful cast of characters around him, both good and bad. But it's meant to be just something to remind you to laugh and be and have fun with comics. That's kind of the message of that book. Is just it's fun.
Did Seth come up with the visuals for that Floppy Cop? Not just the Floppy Cop itself. Did he come up with that?
Yeah. In fact, we made a point. When we work together, he knows that I draw a lot of my own stuff, and this actually was a milestone for me, this book, because it was the first book that I've written and not illustrated. I've always, any project that I wrote, I drew it. Mostly because, it's hard to find somebody that will collaborate with you, especially when I was early on coming up in comics. Now it's, manageable, and knowing, I know a ton of artists, I know a ton of writers, and I can talk to them, but our time is valuable, and it's hard to get things working. So when we came together on this thing, he was like, "Do you have any character sketches for it?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, yeah, but I don't want to show you." I'm like, I don't want to draw them. I don't want you to see it and then just do my take on it. I wanted the Seth Damoose take. And I don't want to have any influence on the visual. All I did was I told him the description, like any script would do.
Right.
And we like to, we're treating this, we're co-creators on this. It's not like I hired him out or like he hired me or whatever. Like we both put our skin in the game in this one. So, I didn't want to be in that spot to like pull any of that fun away from him. I'm like, just, you've got to own that. And plus I want him to have fun with it. And so he came back with all these amazing concept sketches and character sketches, and he pretty much nailed Floppy Cop from the first go almost. I think he got it was either first or second take, he got exactly the kind of funny look he wanted. In fact, I think that one of his first takes ended up being the image you see on the inside front cover, and I just had it colored up and we put it in there. But it was just it was so spot on. I'm like, this is the guy.
Aside from doing Floppy Cop, to get away from sort of like that, all this heavy stuff that you're involved in, how do you sort of deal with that, sort of mental health aspect of, writing and creating these really heavy stories that, like you said, your mind can get sort of murky at times, diving deep into it, so how do you sort of deal with that mental health aspect of it?
That's a good question. Honestly, that's a question I think more people should ask, because it's been a very interesting summer for me, particularly because of juggling, 2 heavy books and then 1 funny book. And then, I got a life too. I got a wife and 2 kids, and there's all the day-to-day stuff. And yeah, I'll be honest, I have been leaning on my things that I go to for fresh perspective quite a bit lately, and one thing that I do a lot is I go for kind of long runs, hopefully by myself, but lately I've been having to push a 2-seater stroller with the kids.
Right.
But when I need to get my head clear, I kind of just take a run, and it's the closest thing I can get to my time to kind of decompress and get get away from that stuff. And it's also hard in the summer because there's not a whole lot of conventions. I love doing, for the most part, there's a lot more that I love about conventions than any of the perceived negatives of them. It's a lot of hard work doing those, but I love them because I get to connect with my fans and my friends and my colleagues and all that. And when I get a couple of those under my belt, I feel like I could take on the world. I get this kind of a high off of it. And so I haven't had that a proper convention since May, I think. And I'm kind of jonesing for one. Luckily I got a string of them coming up in the fall. I've got a signing at Comic Signal in a week from tomorrow, but then I've got Wizard World Chicago, Dragon Con, Keystone Comic Con, which is in Philly, and then New York Comic Con and Kokomo Con, all within the span of about 2 months. So I'll go from not having that at all to having more of it than I can possibly wrap my head around. But it's a good thing, I think, mentally to kind of reconnect and get away from my drawing table so much.
What do you like the most about doing the conventions? What is some of the conversations that you're having with your fans?
Yeah, another good question. Well, I mean, it is to me, it really, truly is the people that I get to see there. I mean, you get crazy people too. Like there's a certain element of it that you can look at as almost like retail if you think of it that way, and that can be a little bit tough. But I've been doing conventions for, I don't know, I mean, my whole adult life basically. So 15 something years, 16 years, and I know pretty much without any real exceptions that I can go to a convention and I will know some people there, and so I can connect with friends I only get to see at these shows because we all live so far away from each other. And we talk about like whatever is on our mind. It's rarely anything bad or anything. It's always just kind of like like what's going on, and what are you working on, and can I show you this? Because like a lot of times we can't really show the work we're working on out in the public, but I want an opinion on something, and I can go to my buddy and think of this, and they can be like, well, you could have drawn that arm better or something, like whatever it is, and it's fun because they get it. Like you're dealing with fellow creators, and there's a very I think there's a certain type of person who does conventions, at least in the way that I would feel like they're a comrade. Like people who've done it for more than 5 years, I'd say, really kind of know some of the hard knocks and some of the like realities of it, and they just kind of talk to you like that, and like that's always the kind of conversation that I can't really get anywhere else. And then of course, like I said, like seeing my fans, or like hearing that somebody read something that I did a while ago and finally come to you and say like, hey, that was really cool, or it's scary or funny or whatever.
Right.
There's like a very delayed gratification in comics of by the time somebody reads something, it might be something that I worked on as much as like 9 months ago, or maybe even a year ago, and like they're finally seeing it and they're like, dude, I love that. I'm like, well, good to know, because it's been this long. It's like, what if it sucked? Like they're like, yeah, this is terrible. Like, and then you're like, oh, well, it's been out there for 9 months now and you finally told me this. No. And so like there's like this really kind of delayed gratification, I think, in terms of the work, and out of payment. I think actually, like, I think you make a movie and like 2 years later it comes out, and you almost have to remember what you did on set when it happened, when you talk to people about it. But it's kind of the same with comics. I feel like it's like the thing I'm working on now in my lap right here won't see the light of day for at least 6 months. So it's nice when people come up and say like, hey, I like that, because it kind of reaches all the way back into the past and tells you that you did something good.
What do you think it takes for a comic book creator to be successful, doing the convention circuit?
I think patience is certainly a lot to do with it. You have to be, I think, a bit thick-skinned when it comes to getting people that don't want to buy your stuff, or they don't, like or even seeing like other creators that you're near that are killing it, and you're just sitting there with tumbleweed. Like that happens to everybody. And there's a lot of that you have to learn to deal with while you find your audience. And I think that's the thing that you have to keep your eyes set on, is like, who is my audience? Who am I really trying to talk to? And you can't really, I don't think you can just make it up out of thin air. Like, it kind of becomes this ragtag bunch of people that come from all walks of life and are all different, and they just happen to have some sort of sensibility in common with each other in terms of liking what you do. But what it does do, I think, is it makes you more aware of like what you're trying to do and say. Like, I think when I first started off, I was very I don't know, like I didn't have like a set idea of who I wanted to be, and I didn't know what the right path was. And so the more conventions you do, you start seeing what wouldn't be something you want to do. You know, like I don't want to be the Wall of Prince guy, or like I don't want to be the tchotchke person, or like the just doing commissions. Like, you know, like I want to be the guy with like my art and my writing out front and center, and then you know, I want people who like my art to come up and commission something or like buy something, but I want them to like my art and not like, you know, something that I did that I thought they would please them. You know, like I've done that too. Like I've done all that stuff at this point because I've been doing this for a long time. So I've done stuff that I knew was going to be an easy crowd pleaser, and I enjoyed it actually. Like it wasn't a bad thing to do. But I found that the longer I went with that, I got bored with it and didn't feel like it was serving my long game, which was to be, you know, a version of myself that I felt good about people, you know, putting their eyes on. And I think that that's the struggle, that if you're a newcomer that really cares about trying to be a convention person, or like just a public figure in general, like, because we are essentially public figures. Like if you want to be that, conventions help temper and refine your idea of who you want to be, because you're kind of dashing yourself against the rocks and you know, smoothing yourself out as you go.
What sort of mind state do you have to be in to figure out what your audience is, and what should, you know, creators do to continue to build that up once they realize who their audience is?
Well, that's a yeah. I don't know if there's one set answer to that. I think some people may have a clearer vision of who they want to be than I did or do. You know, I think some people know, like, I want to be a cover artist for DC. Like, I want to draw, you know, I want to draw Spider-Man monthly, or like, you know, they have that, like, and I mean this in a good way, like that tunnel vision of like, I want to be that guy, you know, or that I want to be even maybe down to an artist. Like maybe they want to be like, I don't know, Paul Pope or something like that. Like, you know, where they see it, that's what they want to do. And in a way that cuts out a lot of the BS of trying to figure yourself out.
Right.
You just know, like, I want to be this guy, and that's cool. Like I knew that I wanted to tell stories, and I wanted them as much as possible to be my stories, you know, like, and I love being a part of other people's stuff too. Like that's actually made me a better storyteller. But I think that I had to figure that out by being open to falling flat on my face a lot. Like Floppy Cop could have been a flop. Like I was ready to make that joke. Like I was just, like, oh, this sucks, man. I'm like, yeah, it's a total flop. Be Cop, and just be a total, like, a dad joke cornball about it. And luckily people loved it, but it was a total departure from everything people knew about me. Like the closest thing I would have is like Beardo, which is funny, but it's more like slice of life autobiographical stuff. And so Floppy Cop's like totally different. And I like doing that. Like I like kind of trying something new and being, I wouldn't say like trying to reinvent myself, but being a little bit more like a chameleon and adapting to, you know, certain genres or stories, and just seeing how, like, pushing myself to see if I can make it good, you know. And I've got a pile of stuff in here that sucks. Like, I mean, there's like all kinds of ideas that are half formed or not working or just fail, you know, not failures, but they're the reason why the other thing works is because I already worked through a bunch of things that didn't, you know.
Yeah.
But I think for people, like, I think it's okay to fail, quote unquote, because it shows you're willing to take that risk and not just be pigeonholed as like just the guy who does, you know, one thing, or the girl who is known for this, and like I would have a hard time staying active and interested in art if I just kept doing the same thing all the time.
How do you stay sort of being that chameleon to doing different sort of things when at the same time, whatever you're working on might not even see the light of day for 9 months to a year plus? How do you sort of compartmentalize everything?
That's a great. I mean, again, you got some great questions about like. I think a lot of artists will appreciate the questions you're asking because I'm sure they have an answer in their head too. Um, it's not easy, and I'd like to say it gets better with age, but some I feel like sometimes it gets worse. Like I constantly I have to like categorize the doubts in my head as, is this helping or hurting what I'm doing right now? Because I have doubts that I think are valid. Like, maybe what I'm doing needs another round of revisions, or like maybe I need to not work on this project because it's not good for my career versus, one that might be a risk, but could lead to good things or whatever. Like those doubts are good doubts because those are like things I can quantify. But there's some that are just like, like the old, like, shouldn't you just go get a real job doubt, like those thoughts, or like, am I a good enough artist? Am I a good enough writer? And like, I've learned that those thoughts are always going to be there. But I've learned how to at least not let them get in my way. Because like, what's the point of letting them do that? Like, it's
Right.
only going to make they're only going to validate themselves or be like a self-fulfilling prophecy if I really listen to them. So instead, I'm just, okay, let me actually deal with the doubts that I can do something about, That rhymed. That was kind of cool. Didn't mean to, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I think a lot of artists probably feel the same way. And I think what you should keep in mind if you're maybe less in this than people that are 10 years in or 15 years in, is that it's almost good to hear that people who you respect, like I love hearing artists that I admire and respect, be real about that and say like, hey, look, I struggle with self-doubt, depression, feeling of worthlessness, or like no value, like, or that I'm not good enough. Like, that's everybody. Like, at least if you care, like if you care about what you're doing, you're going to feel those things. And so I think it's good when people talk about that stuff, because too often, you get these artists who not only feel that way, but because they're artists, they don't get out very much because they're working a lot. And so you have a lot of time with yourself, a lot of solitary time. That's no good for anybody.
Nah,
you
nah, nah.
you gotta get out and find that thing to reconnect to humanity. Because when it's all said and done, you still got to be a person too. And that's, again, so that goes back to what I'm saying. Like, I like when people talk about, being a real person with doubts and flaws and everything.
When you're going from project to project, do you feel like any of your projects are almost like going down an easier route than any of the other ones? Meaning, do you feel like this will be maybe an easier time to a success, or do you feel like everything's just a risk?
Uh, no, I mean, there's some projects that, I've gotten a little bit choosier, and I'm lucky in a lot of ways. And one of them is that I've been around long enough to have a nice little fan base built up that I know I can count on to help, at least get that initial momentum that I need. Because a project needs to get out there and get the word out, and like, you gotta get retailers to order it. If you have a publisher, you gotta get them excited about it. You gotta do all these things ahead of time that are like businessy sort of stuff. And I also have, I get to be a little bit more selective with who I choose to work with now. I used to be like, I would take anything that came my way, and I'm not knocking any of those projects. They were work. They were what I needed to do. But like, sometimes they weren't. I wasn't the right fit. It was not fight for it, sort of. Now, like, like, I'm working with friends mostly. Like, I work with people that I value their work, and they value mine. And if we argue about anything, it's not an argument. It's more like just a discussion about is this working or is it not? And it's great. But some projects are easier than others. I think Floppy Cop is actually kind of, if I'm in the right mood, it's easy as I'll get out. Like if I'm feeling goofy, basically, if I'm feeling like I kind of follow my mood lately. Like when it comes to doing stuff, I'm like, if I'm feeling in the mood to be a Floppy Cop guy today, that's what I'm gonna do. Like, or at least I'm gonna devote like an hour or two to that and see where it goes. Whereas if I'm feeling kind of mindless sometimes and I just want to draw, then I'll jump on whatever fires in front of me first. Like, because I got like probably like 4 or 5 things going at once usually, and I kind of there's an advantage to that, even though it sounds daunting, is that it's a pretty easy cure for creative blocks.
Right.
If you have a bunch of different fire, you just go to the one that's cooking the best for you at that moment. Like if the other ones are cold, they'll heat up again. They will. Like I feel like I've told this to a lot of my students at the school. Like, like if you have a couple things going and then you don't try so hard to force it, like it'll happen. Like your best ideas tend to come like when you're not trying to think about it. Like when you're in the shower or driving in the car, like all of a sudden you're like, that's the thing, and if you feel that way, if you can learn to harness that, like it can be a very powerful tool. So, yeah, I mean that's probably that's probably enough to that subject. But like, yeah, right now I'm pretty blessed because I have some good projects that I'm genuinely excited about, and I'm not like, it's not just a paycheck. It's like it's part of my what I would consider to be like my I don't know, portfolio, or my brand or whatever, like my who I am, part of the stable.
When
So
after all these years, when you now have this sort of circle of friends that you get to work with, how much does that lead to your creativity?
like the circle of friends,
Yeah.
it's really cool to have people around me to bounce off ideas and for them to bounce ideas off of me. And like I was, currently I've got Dirk and I on Cosa Nostra. I've got Seth and I, and to some extent Jay Fosgitt on the cover. Like he's somebody that I really respect and admire the hell out of, and he's like one of my favorite artists. And it's great to like, be able to just reach out to him and say like, here's what we're going to do for issue 2. Like he's actually going to be, and part of me wants to tell him like draw this, and part of me again wants to just leave him alone and like let him do his thing, because I just think he's so funny and can come up with whatever he wants, and I love it. And that's not always the case with everybody. Like, some people, if I hired certain people or if I wanted to work with people, like I'd have to give them a lot of direction, and then there's just some people who I just feel are part of that creative energy that I already espouse, and I'm like, let's just have at it. Like when I was saying like, with Dirk, we had a car ride, I think, to Philadelphia and for a convention, and he was driving and I was in the passenger seat with a notepad, and I think we basically scripted out or mapped out the whole script in that car ride, and that was fun to do. Like it was kind of cool to be able to just say like, oh, what if we had this beat here, or what if act 2 was a little bit different, and maybe we introduce a character here that's going to pay off there, and those kind of questions I love all day. Like I love the strategy of creativity, like just mapping out the story. But it's fun too to like even just look at people's Instagrams or Facebooks that I follow, and I kind of do that in the morning just to kind of see what people are up to. And I love, I got a lot of people who post pretty regularly, and it's always fun to like wake up to like a new drawing from like Jay Fosgitt or Jenny Frizen or who else is it? Trad Moore. Like like I just kind of see these things and I'm like, oh, game on! Like they got some cool stuff, and now I gotta rip off that.
When you're working with these people that you're friends with, and you just sort of give them their space to like, here, come up with something. I'm gonna give you a little bit of some guidelines, but I want you to sort of, show me what you're thinking. What sort of creativity comes out of you when you see what they get?
Yeah, good question. I mean, like the best example right now is Floppy Cop because with Cosa Nostra, Dirk, he hands me the script and I usually have a pretty good idea already because we'd mapped it out beforehand. So like I'm expecting certain things that he talked about, right? And I enjoy from an artist standpoint on his stuff, interpreting and sort of massaging the details out of the script so that it flows as effortlessly as possible. Like my goal is for you to just not notice, the art until second reading, like where you go like, oh man, like, so now that I've read through it, let me look at it again. Cause that's what I always used to do when I was but like as a kid, I would blaze through the story and then I would go back and read it again with like a more scrutinizing eye, like see how they did it. And so on that front, it's fun to get a script like with Dirk's that tends to be pretty conversational. He's kind of a conversational, talky kind of guy. Like he's not beating you over the head with it, but he likes to like, let his characters say some stuff and breathe and act and react. So that's a good challenge from a storytelling standpoint visually to craft something that doesn't feel just like two talking heads back and forth. Like I hate that stuff where like I hate, but that's a strong word, but like I always feel like some of the best scenes are the ones where nothing's happening and you have to, except for somebody talking, and you have to really like use the room and the characters to make it come to life. So conversely with Seth, I send him the script and a lot of times he doesn't know what's going to happen in it. Like he knows some of the broad strokes, but he doesn't know like some of the detours that it might take or like the weird, there's something in issue two that I don't want to say yet, but I couldn't stop laughing as I was writing it. It's so dumb, but it has something to do with the story, but I describe it as like, you could probably cut it from the story and the story would still run its course. But I have a feeling when people read this, it's going to be their favorite part of the book. Like, just because of how much it stays true to the heart of what Floppy Cop is, which is supposed to be, to do goofy, dumb, and sometimes inappropriate stuff to make you laugh. So when I get stuff back from Seth, like, it's just a whole... I try to write to Seth, and I know his style, and I feel like I have some small advantage as somebody who's an artist and a writer of understanding what an artist would want to see, or at least I hope that's what's happening. But Seth's got his own particular like style and skill set, and he still like manages to surprise me and make me laugh in ways that I didn't expect, and it's just so much fun. It makes me want to write like 100 stories and then have Seth quit everything else and just draw them, because I want to it's selfishly just wanting to play with his it. But it's really great, man. Like I love I think that's what I love about these creator-owned projects, because you don't get to have the same kind of freedom when there's all these other hands in the pot, like when you have people we're all professionals, but we're all kind of doing what we feel is our vision, and we don't have to really answer to anyone but ourselves. Like, and I don't take that lightly. I take that really seriously. I think what comes from that can be some of the best comics that you're going to get.
Right, definitely. You also teach comics in Chicago. Talk more about that.
Yeah, I teach at the International School of Comics in Chicago. I'm going into my fourth year there now, which is crazy to me. I gotta pinch myself sometimes thinking about that, because it just feels like it was yesterday I started there. But I teach there with Jill Thompson, who's a multi-Eisner award-winning super goddess creator. She you'll know her from like Scary Godmother and Wonder Woman, True Amazon, and Sandman. Like her resume is like, it's top shelf. Like you can't really get much better than Jill. So I get to teach alongside her, and then one of my dear friends. Well, we're all friends, but Doug Klauba, who's the guy who actually brought me in, was somebody I've always looked up to because he's a phenomenal artist. Again, award-winning painter and just a guy who knows his stuff in terms of like every facet of storytelling and visual arts, and like it's just inspiring to be alongside these people. And then what's even cooler is that you get students coming in, and they're all pretty much adults because we have a 3-year program and it's geared towards adults. So I mean, my youngest student was like 18, but I had students as old as like 40 who all are very passionate about telling their stories through comics, and so they want an experience that goes beyond just what you would get like in an illustration course, or even like a graphic design course. So we're doing that sort of stuff plus adding this element of visual storytelling that only comics can do. That allows you to really cut to the core of like what you want to say. I think that's what's great about comics is that like it's the definition of words and pictures together. I think comics, I think that's really what that is, and that's my favorite way of expressing stuff. And everything uses words and pictures somehow. So so these guys really get a pretty thorough 3-year education that combines fundamentals and life drawing and all the core stuff that you get with a traditional art program with the comics storytelling process. And we talk a lot about business too. Like we talk about what you want to do to set yourself up as a creator, putting yourself out there online and how to do it. If you want to be the kind of person to start doing shows, we try to educate them on how to approach that and what it's like and like the realities of it. Like I always tell my students, with no bias or spin on it, like here's what happened at this show for me. Like I did great or I did terrible or what I think I could have done better, just so they get real actual experience. That's what I always wanted from my education that I felt like I didn't get. So I always tell them like the reality of, Kickstarters and conventions and fan bases and all the fun stuff that goes along with being this person trying to make comics.
Nice. To sort of wind down this interview, if there's sort of a nugget of knowledge that you could extract from your life and career that anybody listening to this, whether they're a comic book creator or not, could sort of apply to their own life, what would that be?
Recently I've been thinking about criticism, like hearing it or giving it. And I think for me, what I talked about this with somebody else recently too, but I wanted to kind of expand on it. It's as somebody who's now a teacher, I have to criticize my students, and it's such a negative sounding word, but it's really not. Like it's, because I only have their best intentions at heart. Like I'm not like, well, I'm going to show this guy, I'm gonna tear him down a peg. Like I'm not interested in that. Like I don't want to do that to them. Like they're my students. I'm trying to make them better.
Right.
But you have critiques and you have feedback or whatever you want to call it. And it's interesting being on the other side of it, of giving it more than getting it. Because I remember getting it a lot, from editors and from my teachers and from fans. Like sometimes it's hard to take. And I think back on times like when I see a student take it hard, I have to remember that I also probably took something like that hard once, that they've got feelings and that they're putting themselves out there and that this is hard enough for them. And like their confidence might not be there yet because it's, they haven't accomplished things yet that they want to accomplish. And they will if they just keep at it. But I think criticism is the one thing I would say, like, you have to learn how to exist with it. Like, and as you take more of it, and my advice would be to take as much of it as you can, like just to, welcome it and be like, hey, like I got to know more about what I'm doing right and wrong. And you'll start getting people who say stuff and you'll start to develop like an ear for it. Like, are they telling me this because they need to say something, or do they actually have something to say? Like some people just have to say something because they have to chime in. Even
Right.
if what they say is like meaningless or has no relevance to what you're talking about, they just have to say something. And you're like, okay, I can put that aside and I don't really feel like that did anything, or somebody will say something and it has a lot of punch and it hits you right in the gut and it might even hurt a little bit. And if you can tell the person's well intended, then it probably struck a chord of truth and you're just having a hard time dealing with it. You're just like, he's right. My line weight is terrible. Or like, I'm using the wrong pens, or my pacing in this was bad, or whatever it is. But like if they say it and you already knew, like in your head, you might have thought that too, like you're onto something there. And you start just learning, like from taking a lot of criticism, like what to put, in one category and what to put in another. And then just some people who are just jerks and they just want to, like trolls or whatever, like they just want to be hateful. Like you can put that in a category and throw it in the garbage, like, so, all that combined, like, I think the only way to do it is to be open to taking it, like to go to drink and draws or go to wherever people are hanging out that are artists and just say, like, here's what I'm working on, thoughts, and then just see what happens. But if you can do that and learn to exist with criticism, I think you're on the right track.
Yeah, I always like to end all my interviews with the same question. Who is somebody that's been a part of your life or career that I could realistically interview and they would have some great stories or lessons to tell?
Well, somebody who's a part of my life that you can interview. Actually, I would say the first person that came to mind was DJ Corchin. He is somebody who I've collaborated with on, I think, 10 books now.
Okay.
And he's been somebody, like, we came up together as I responded to his Craigslist ad for a illustration job like a long time ago, and now we're he's one of my best friends basically, and he also is just somebody who I think is very inspiring, not just to me but to a lot of other people. I would definitely say that guy I'd be interested to hear his take, and I also just would love to hear him talk about his work. So yeah, DJ would be the guy.
Awesome. If anybody wants to find out more information about anything that you're working on, where can they go online?
Yeah, they can go on www.beardocomics.com. That's my website. So it's beardocomics.com. That's got a lot of my books, and actually all my books that I can sell, and a lot of my work and my convention appearances. And you can even sign up for my mailing list. I send out a monthly email that just kind of tells people where I'm at and what's new and is real low key. You can find me on Facebook under Dan Dougherty, or even on the Beardo page. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram under @Beardo Comics. I'm pretty out there already, so like it's pretty easy to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Dude, it's been great talking with you. A lot of good knowledge. Thanks for chatting with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So that was my interview with Dan Dougherty. More information about where you can check out all of his works will be in the show notes for this podcast at freshasthepodcast.com. Now on to the Fresh is the Word Fresh Pick of the Week. This episode's pick is the comic book Submerged via Vault Comics. The story is about Elisa Puente, who is trying to find her little brother Angel, who might be in deep trouble during one of the biggest storms to ever hit New York City. Illustrated by Lisa Sturl and colored by Stella Dia, I really connected with the mood and the look of this comic because it reminded me of the time I was stuck in New York City during Hurricane Irene in 2011. With a story written by Vida Alea, It really caught the realism of a vibrant city like New York when it's basically shut down and then having to deal with some supernatural bullshit. So go pick up some merch today at your local comic book store. Issue number 2 was just released this past Wednesday, and both issues feature cover artwork from both Lisa Sturl and another favorite of mine, Jen Bartel. Links to where you can check out more information on Submerge and all the artists involved are in the show notes at freshasthepodcast.com. And before we get out of here, I definitely want to give a shout out to Knox Money, Bang Belushi, and Foulmouth for the theme music for Fresh as the Podcast. And plus, a reminder on how you can support the podcast. You can always go to freshasthepodcast.com and share any links that you see on the website for any of the episodes on any of your social media platforms. You can also subscribe to Fresh as the Word on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Mixcloud, Google Play, and TuneIn. Just type in Fresh as the Word and it should come up pretty easily. And if you can, please leave a rating and a review, especially on Apple Podcasts. And if I do see one, I'll definitely read it on an upcoming episode. And you can also follow me online on Twitter and Instagram at KellyOmegaFresh and on Facebook at facebook.com/KFresh. And you can also follow Fresh as the Word online on Twitter at FITW Podcast, on Instagram at Fresh as the Word Podcast, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Fresh as the Podcast. Thank you for listening. Next week will be the episode 100 celebration with episode 100 with special guest Brooklyn hip-hop legend Masta Ace, and episode 101 with Detroit techno legend and pioneer Carl Craig. It'll be an exciting week. Thank you for listening. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.